All right, so we're now streaming. So welcome to the July 10, 2023 special meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Appreciate you all being here this evening. Madam Clerk, would you call a roll, please?
You're on mute. Irene, there you go.
Mayor Rilling. Mr. Abrams.
Here.
Mr. Constant.
Here.
Mr. Frey. No more Mr. Freyer. Mr. Gilleret.
Here.
Mr. Kasimis.
Here.
Miss Yang. Here. And Mayor Rilling.
Here.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we get started, I think we all would like for the public record to congratulate Jim Freyer on his new role on the Common Council. It's terrific for the council. It's a little bit of a bittersweet moment for us as Board of Estimate and Tax. He's been a great member of this board, and I know personally I'm going to miss his insights and his guidance as we go forward. Before we move through the regular agenda here, Mr. Mayor, is there any comment you'd like to make to start things off tonight?
Well, I'm very proud of the fact that Fortune magazine has named Norwalk the 29th best place in the country, the entire country, to raise a family. And it's because of the people like this board here, other boards and commissions, my employees, all the people that live here that make this such a great city. So thank you for the opportunity to promote it once again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right, let's move right into our agenda then. The first item is the approval of the July 5th minutes. Can I get a motion to bring that to discussion, please?
I'll make a motion.
Thank
So
you, Artie. Any changes, amendments, revisions to the minutes as published in the agenda? All right, seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes as provided, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? All right, the minutes are approved. Moving down our agenda, there are no special appropriations this evening. We can move right to the transfer agenda, which starts on page 11 of our package. As I mentioned to some, I'm actually going to ask for two motions here. First, I need a motion to begin discussion on the transfer items.
So moved.
Thank you, Artie. Second, I need a motion to add one additional item to the transfer list for discussion that Tom Ellis provided under separate cover.
So moved, Troy.
Thank you, Troy. All right, Tom, let's go ahead and just jump right into the discussion on the transfer agenda.
All right, first one is on page 13, and this one happens to be for the chief of staff / mayor / city clerk area. The main reason for this one is due to the severance payout that the former chief of staff was entitled to. So we fortunately had an underrun on the mayor's side. We're able to transfer some of the money from there. And then also in the customer service area. So if you're looking at page 13, there are three things there that are going to be cleaned up with this transfer. The full-time wages, part-time wages, and then also for the mayor's side. So total of 124,000.
Tom, I just have a quick question. You're using the word severance. Is severance usually used, did she resign or did she was let go? I mean, I'm not sure of that word.
She resigned, but this was these were payouts for unused vacation and sick that she was entitled to.
Okay.
So it's nothing out of the ordinary.
All right. Thank you.
It's just in the police and the fire department, we usually have a better idea of the upcoming retirements quite some time in advance, so we can do a little bit better job publishing or planning for that. But with
A question.
say again.
Tom, you also add communications there. Is there a communications person that left as well?
No, that was the new hire. Our new communications director came in at a slightly
Gotcha.
higher rate than was previously budgeted. So
Okay.
that's where that came from.
Here's a suggestion. And unless this is sort of the standard term, there's a different term that can be used instead of such as there's another, because severance, I have the same question as Troy, and it might be a little bit more accurate to not, but it's the payout of the benefits of nation.
Okay,
I think the term I've heard used in the past is a payout of all accrued amounts
Right.
that are owed to the person who's leaving. And I agree with you, severance tends to mean a different type of departure from the employment. So we can try to use that language in the future. Sorry.
Thank you. Any other questions related to this particular transfer item? Okay, Tom, we want to move to city clerk.
Yes, so city clerk is the next one here, total of $17,000. The history on this one is that the Veterans Commission used to be budgeted in the Rec and Parks area. Given that most of the requests ended up coming through the mayor and the city clerk's office, the decision was made to move the budget. This is again for 20,000 or 2024. So this will shift the $17,000 in funds for the Veterans Commission into Irene's jurisdiction, as she and the mayor work much closer with that type of activity.
Okay, and then that'll be reflected in the 2025 budget going forward, so it'll be in the right location.
Yeah, so
correct?
this first one is just going to shift the 2024 budget, and then next year when we go through this planning process, or the budget planning process, we'll have that spiked out within city clerk.
Okay. Any additional questions regarding this item? Okay, shall we move to our monthly transfer from the police department for vehicle upfits and outfits? Seems to be a recurring theme.
We have Mickey Dosmo and Chief Walsh both on the line. This tends to be a bit of a recurring theme, at least over the last few months, with all of the supply chain issues and inflation challenges that have impacted so many. But one of you guys wants to take it away, give a brief explanation on this?
Yes, thank you, everybody, for kind of sticking with us on this. This is my end of the year transfers. It happens every year. The only difference this year, there's actually two differences. One is this is not just leftover funds. This is actually a department-wide initiative to reserve some funds for the ongoing vehicle issues that you've all been kind enough to help us with. And it's all going into one account. Unlike previous years, it's going into the cars and vans account to be spent on, like we said, the supply chain issues, the price increases, upfits, so on and so forth. It's fairly straightforward, and we'll have it executed within a couple of months.
Thank you.
And to Mickey's point, the board has to realize is that the police department hasn't taken a delivery of a car in over 2.5 years. So
right.
we are, I was talking to Mickey, we are cresting this. So moving forward, I think that the past 6 months have been, as you said, monthly, but we will be cresting this issue probably with this meeting.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Also in there, I see $305,000 for overtime associated with officers at Norwalk Public Schools. Does that cover actuals, or is that estimated for going into the future school year?
No, last year at this time, post-Uvalde, there is discussions with Dr. Estrella and Mayor Rilling about increasing security. So these are security overtime hires that already occurred in the past school year.
Yes.
We were approached by the Board of Ed a couple months ago. They had discussions over at City Hall, and there was a deficit in their budget to pay the rest of these hires with. So this money is being transferred out of our salary account to make up that deficit.
Thank you for the explanation. Other questions?
Yes, I have a question. Roughly, how many is it the equivalent of 3 man years, or 3? Were they full time? How did it work? And if it's paying overtime, is there perhaps going forward, hiring, the full-time security people that may not be as expensive and paying overtime for the police officers.
Hiring full-time civilian security?
Well,
Whether it's,
I think Ann's question, if I can try and rephrase it a little bit, is $305,000 in overtime is a significant amount of overtime. The question is, if we were to hire full-time equivalents, whether they're regular police officers or other trained security, would it be cheaper on an ongoing basis than the 305 in overtime?
Currently, out of our 181 authorized sworn, we dedicate 6 officers to school resource officers. There are 21 school buildings in the city of Norwalk, so we assign them geographically through the towns who provide the best security. So we noticed that more security was requested last summer post-Uvalde. So what we did is we added additional hires, and these were overtime hires of patrolmen that went through our extra work system. And what they did is they actually did security at all these schools. So for us to add more people to the SRO program, there would be a deficit in patrol.
Okay.
Because we have other, so we'd be taken from one unit and we'd be backfilling over there. So it always takes from somewhere.
So then it really would be a question better suited to the Board of Education as to whether using Norwalk Police to provide this coverage and the cost that they are supposed to be paying to you and reimbursing versus other sources. It's really a cost benefit analysis for Norwalk Public Schools. Is that fair?
That's a fair statement, yes.
Okay. Additional questions on the police transfers? Okay. Tom, do we want to move to fair rent?
Yes, I believe we have Anna Vivian on the line here for increased legal fees in the fair rent department.
Nope, you're
I
gonna
see
have
we
Lamont
Mr.
Daniels.
Lamont as well.
Hey, Lamont.
Hey there. I'm sorry, you ready for me?
Yeah, I thought I saw Anna Vivian's name on there. as well,
Oh,
but I
no,
don't see her now.
I gave her the night off. She has twins.
Okay.
Little ones at that.
All
So
right,
good
this-
evening. So good evening. So we're asking for 2 things. One thing, while we are asking for transfer, our language line is being heavily used by just so for those that know, Norwalk, we take pride in that of any resident that comes into any of our city services. We have the international language line that our employees are trained to use to speak in their language. Our health department stays busy with their clinics and other services, so there has been an increase in the language line usage, which is therefore we're requesting additional funding. Just to give you a perspective, in year 2022, in year 2022, we expended $10,697 just last year alone. We're up to 19,000 because it is being heavily used, and Norwalk has a rich, diverse culture that we have other languages that our employees don't speak. And so for the purpose of this transfer, so we can close out the year, we're asking for $8,200. Which also includes our fair rent legal consultant expenses. We have compiled these services under the other contractual services. So about 2/3 of that will be to cover our language line expenses, and the remaining will cover our fair rent legal consulting price expenses. Just alone in over 9 months, we have served over 250 residents coming into our office to file a complaint, could be potentially around their fair rent increase, evictions, getting housing discrimination, a variety of services. And so we have a part-time attorney that consults with us when needed with Carlos, who is the fair rent coordinator. So we're asking for $8,200 to cover those expenses. And let me just peek and tell my wife who's coming upstairs with the kids to wait. Okay, thank you.
Any questions for Lamont on the transfer? Okay, thank you, Lamont.
Thank you.
Should we move to Parks and Rec?
Yes, the next one is Ken Hughes is with us to talk about fulfilling a recent request on additional summer concerts. So Ken, take it away, and you're on mute right now. There you go.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Yes, so we had a request about a month ago from several council members to start a jazz concert series. So we were able to come up with 3 acts that we had to book. And in order to book the acts, we had to pay them, or we have to pay them, now for acts that are, for end of July, beginning of August. So we were able to transfer some funds through various accounts, as you can see, and these will cover the funds for 3 jazz concerts, which we will be announcing shortly.
Ken, any questions for Ken?
Yes, I have a question. Are there ticket sales for the jazz concerts, or is it free entry?
They're free. So we hold, all of our concerts are free.
Okay.
Is it the same, Ken, is it the same venue or different venues around the city?
It's going to be different venues around the city.
Additional questions?
Nope.
All right. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Move to planning and zoning. I don't know, do we want to take?
Yeah,
Next two
so
together?
this one is a little bit of 2023 and also a little bit of 2024. Somewhat the same reason, to align the funding with the actual headcount. And tonight we have Steve Kleppen on the line to talk through this one.
Sure, and happy to take any questions. I think it's almost easier to start in reverse order from the agenda, just because planning and zoning and conservation have always really been a single department. There was, at one time, there was a planning department and a zoning department and a separate conservation department now, but it's really all merged into one department. We share the same space, same staff. And I think what happened with the current budget is there's a staff person that was misassigned to conservation that really is actually a P&Z employee, which accounts for our shortfall for the current fiscal year. So we talked to Tom about this a while ago, and we just figured it was easier to merge the 2 departments with the new fiscal year once we got the budget straightened out for the current fiscal year. And then at the same time deal with the shortfalls that we have for salaries and a couple of the other line items.
Mhm. Okay.
I just have a quick question on the accounting error, payroll error. What was that?
It really wasn't an error. It's just there's one person whose salary was within the Conservation Commission budget, who's actually a P&Z employee. So it was too hard to switch it during the middle of the budget cycle. So we figured we'll just deal with it at the end of the budget cycle. We knew the money was there between the 2 departments. It was just in the conservation budget versus the P&Z budget.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions for Steve?
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah.
I think we're used to seeing membership and dues at the beginning of the budget process and seeing it at the end here, just kind of curious.
Yeah, that one is money for the Norwalk River Watershed Initiative that Norwalk is a part of. And that money used to be, I think, a long time ago in the mayor's budget, and then got transferred out of into conservation. And I believe there was a slowdown in the program, but now is kind of kicking back up again. So that's Norwalk's portion of the fund for that initiative.
So it's considered membership and dues and not the Norwalk River, what you called it?
Norwalk River Watershed Initiative, I believe, is the exact title. It's Norwalk River Watershed, but it's a collaboration between all the communities that are within that entity. And I think it's Wilton. I'm not sure who else is in that as well, but that's Norwalk's contribution to that.
So it's our membership in that organization then?
Correct. Similar to like what we might see for Westcog or something else we're part of. Every community has a certain portion that goes towards different programs within it.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Any other questions for Steve? Thank you, Steve.
Sure.
All right, the next one is for building maintenance. This is also somewhat of a recurring theme. We recall the significant pricing increases between heating oil and heating fuels and natural gas. that took place, I want to say about February or March, and caused us to also make adjustments to the 2024 recommended budget. But this, I am told, is the final one for building management for fiscal 23. An additional $10,000 to cover that. Neil Rennie is not on the line tonight. I told him I could speak to it, but I'm happy to pass along any questions if anybody has them.
Questions?
Nope.
Seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
All right, and then Tom, the amended transfer
so-
item.
Yeah, that's for Lisa B on the tax collection side. What do we got here? There's total of, it was like 14,000, but I think yeah, just under 15,000 to cover mainly the increased postage associated with the supplemental tax bills. Did I get that right, Lisa?
Yeah,
Close?
we had to do a separate mailing because normally we bill the motor vehicle supplement along with the statement billings that we used to do in December. And this year those went out late. They were actually, this board voted to allow us an extended payment period, and they were due March 1st, payable by April 1st. I was able to absorb the printing by shifting things around, but the postage I couldn't. So that's why I'm here for the postage. And there was a little bit of overtime that we asked for too, because we were shorthanded most of the year. I don't know if that's in their packet or not.
Yeah, about $2,200 and change
Yeah.
in overtime. Okay. Questions about this transfer item? Artie?
No, just a general question. Is this something that you can do through email to send bills out, or it has to be by mail by law?
It has to be by mail by law, first class mail. We do have a system where if the taxpayers sign up for our online payment portal, they do get emails. But you'd be really surprised how people really like the paper bill. But that's a good question.
I'm not sure they like the bill though.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. I don't know how to phrase it, but they expect to receive a paper bill in the mail, and if they don't get it when they think they should, they're going to call us.
Yep.
I've been seeing that on Facebook. Everybody's like, "Did you get mail? I didn't get my mail yet. I didn't get." It's just,
Yeah.
Yes.
Ours arrived
It's-
today. So
it's Christmas in July.
It's
There you go.
Christmas in July.
any additional questions for Lisa on the transfer?
I'd just like to make an overall comment, if I could, about the transfers. They're just line item transfers from one area to another. This doesn't increase any of our expenses. It's amazing with the thousands and thousands of data points that we work on during a budget a year ago, that we have a handful of transfers near the end of the year just to true them up. I think the department heads and the chiefs do an excellent job with their estimates and projections down to the line item level, but sometimes we just have to move it around. And if we move it around now before the audit, it saves us a lot of aggravation. So we'll talk about where we are with fiscal 23 budget a little bit later on the agenda. But I just want to point out, this is just truing up some accounting records. Nobody's fault. It's just projection versus the way reality comes in. Thanks.
Thank you.
Henry,
Any
real
additional
quick-
commentary before we vote on the
Yeah.
transfer items?
real quick, Henry, the contingency number for last year, is that number? It was 450 last month, I believe. What is that closed out? Are we done with that, or?
Yeah,
With the
we should
contingency?
be done with that, and we still have about just a little bit less, 448,000 remaining. So, and we have budgeted 1.5 million for 2024, which is consistent with what we've done in the past.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? All right, all in favor of approving the transfer items as presented, signify by saying aye, please.
Are we including the amendment too?
Including the amendment, yes.
I
Opposed? Abstentions? All the transfers pass and are approved. All right. Moving on our agenda, we have no other business in section C. We have additional information in section D. So Tom, do you want to lead us off as we go to Lisa? We finally put her first on an agenda, not last.
Hey, it's a second month in a row I put her towards the front.
We're trying, Lisa, we're trying.
So,
Thank you.
go ahead, Lisa. Floor is
Okay.
yours.
Thank you. We were able to provide you with our end of month figures for June. Not only end of month, but end of fiscal year for the 12-month period. And the packet that you were given had the figures only for May. So as of June, we were now at 98.51% of our adjusted levy. You're going to see that creep up during July and August because our auditors will also recognize our collections on the 2021 grand list that come in 60 days after the end of the close of the fiscal year. So that number is a static number for June, but it will go up because they will consider additional funds as collected on time. With regard to the rest of the narrative that I gave you, I want to acknowledge Member Casimus' comment about the bills and about what's been said on social media and online and so forth. We did realize in, I would say, the second to third week of June that we were not going to be able to make a mailing for June 30th with the tax bills. We did get the bills online. There were a series of issues with the new software and with other matters that just made it impossible to get them out by our statutory deadline of June 30th. But by state law, we can give taxpayers 30 days from the day we mail the bills. So we knew the first batch was going out July 3rd. Then you had the holiday. We knew the rest would go out that week in July. So we made a decision, the administration in my office, that we would give taxpayers until August 7th, Monday, August 7th, to pay on time. The administration has worked very hard to get that information out to the taxpayers. We've got legal notices. We have information on our website. There was a press release that went out, and everybody who calls, and there were many people who did, we've been telling them that they do have a little bit of extra time on account of the fact that we did mail those bills out later than we wanted to. And going forward, I don't expect this to be an issue because we will know what we're doing on the software, and hopefully staffing issues will be addressed and we won't have the issues that we had this year. This was a really, really tough year for the assessors division and for my division, but mercifully, the bills did go out. There are a couple of issues with the bills that you've probably heard about. You've heard about it on social media. It's being addressed. But our information that we got from the assessor's office, we did the best we could with what we had at the time. And anybody who is being improperly billed, we are dealing with it. There were a number of taxpayers, for example, who have their real estate taxes paid through an escrow account. They're used to getting a certain type of bill that's like a memo bill that states that. There was a problem with some of the coding on their bills, and they got a regular bill instead of the memo bill. We are addressing that. There's going to be a separate letter going out next week about that. There were some problems with the tax relief program. There were also some problems with motor vehicle pricing. Our assessor's office is going to be working on that. So we're trying. And I'm glad to answer any questions that you have, but just be aware that we really were working, my assistant and I were working like 7 days a week to try to get this done. And it was a really tough year. So I appreciate your patience with all of us.
No, it's fine, Lisa, and you've done a heroic job managing through change. So on behalf of the board, thank you for all of that. We all know how difficult this has been for you. So appreciate all of that. Any other questions or comments for Lisa? Ann?
Yeah. First off, I applaud you being able to get all the tax bills out in a timely manner. Because it had been delayed, I personally was a bit concerned that there might be cash flow issues. Does a delay in billing, I realize this is just a week's delay, but had there been a greater delay, does that pose any cash flow issues for the city?
I could answer that if you wish. Knock on wood, we've been flush with cash since I got here 4 years ago. We have cash invested in different investment funds. We have deposits at our major bank that are on hand. And even when we went into COVID, we never had a problem with cash flow. It just wasn't an issue. So obviously, when we look at investments, we're restricted on the types of investments we can make. The first priority is no loss of principal. The second issue is liquidity, that we should have enough cash on hand as we need for our expenditures. And then the third is yield. So when it comes to the cash for the city, we're pretty cautious and conservative, and we have quite a bit of cash available, which is a reflection of our rainy day funds. So that's not an issue. The issue is more, there was a trade-off. We could have hit the June 30 deadline. We determined that getting the data more accurate was much more important than hitting a June 30th deadline. And the balance was that Lisa and her team were able to get it out less than a week later. The bills had already been online. Anybody who wanted to pay, the bills were already online in June. So this was just understand the problem. The data was in our system, but we had problems with the new vendor on how to configure the printouts of these bills, especially since with the new software system, they were going to be changing from prior year's bills. So we made a business person's decision on that trade-off. And again, the more accurate the bills, the fewer the complaints, the fewer the problems on the back end. We still have issues with the vendor that we have to clean up, but we would expect the second half bills at the end of this year to be much more smooth.
That's helpful. Lisa, could you comment a little bit on the posts that you see on social media about bills coming in wrong, misbilling? What is it about this software system? Because I think many of these complaints are new. What is it about this software system that makes it more difficult to get the accuracy that you've had in years past?
I've worked on 7 different systems over the course of the past 40 years, I think, almost. This particular system, in my opinion, was developed about 40 years ago and is in use in many municipalities and jurisdictions that are smaller in size to Norwalk. It is also in use in places like Stamford and Bridgeport that are bigger than Norwalk, but Norwalk does some peculiar things with our billing. For example, we have 7 different mill rates. We have service-driven mill rates, which most other municipalities don't have. They have 1 mill rate, maybe 2. We bill our sewer use as part of our real estate bill in order to have a higher collection rate and a more streamlined billing and collection procedure. We don't have to file separate liens for sewer use. We don't have to have separate bills or separate rate books for sewer use. It's all combined. It's also more convenient for the taxpayer. This system wasn't designed to handle that. And I think that it became a little clearer to the vendor as we got into the actual conversion that there were going to be these types of issues. Our old system also that was in use prior even to our former software, going back to when Norwalk had a homegrown system, pre-year 2000, was driven by a customer ID number. Everybody was basically like a social security number in the tax system, and everything drove off that. This system doesn't do that, doesn't use that. So that's why you no longer have a consolidated tax statement. You have separate real estate, separate motor vehicles, separate business, personal property bills. We got over that hurdle. That was just like a learning curve for us that we were going to have to do things differently. And we kind of embraced it. And we ended up designing a bill that I actually think is probably easier for the taxpayer to read, particularly if they're getting, for example, tax relief, tax credits. It's more clear to them what they're getting, what their benefits are. And we did see a reduction in the number of questions that we usually get about that. However, we did get a lot more questions from people who weren't sure that they were getting the right amount. So they were able to see it on the bill, but they thought the amount was wrong. We're trying to deal with that. And that's an assessor's office issue. The assessor's office administers the tax relief programs, and they're working on that right now. But there were some bills that were identified by the taxpayers themselves, where they did not get the right amount of credit. And all of those people, once they're identified, will get an adjusted bill in the mail. And in most cases, they're going to be entitled to more of a credit than their bill reflected. So we'll make sure that they know that if they already pay before we get the corrected bill to them, they'll get credit on their January installment. So one way or another, they will be receiving what they are entitled to get. There were some other issues with the data that have to do more with the assessor's office. So I would defer, to them to respond to those questions.
Great.
Lisa, go ahead,
Thank you.
Anna.
Sorry, Ann. I would just add, Lisa pointed out the challenges we had with the new software. I would also say we migrated from an old software package to a new software package. And the mapping wasn't as smooth and well understood as everyone expected. So I view it as one-time challenges that once we overcome that and the database is structured in a way where the Munis data was put into the QDS database accurately, and that's due to Lisa and her team checking all the data, that issue just goes away in the future. So a lot of it were one-time challenges, and once we've overcome it during this billing period, we should have many fewer errors and corrections.
I only make the comment because this is probably, for most people, myself, the largest bill that you receive during the year. And so it reflects upon the city in terms of how well the city is run, that this whole process goes smoothly. So I applaud your efforts in terms of trying to make this as accurate and seamless and as user-friendly as possible. Thank you.
And Lisa, one follow-up question, and it's probably better for the tax assessor's office, but do you have any sense of what percent of the city population is impacted by incorrect tax bills, issues that truly need to be corrected?
I would have no way of knowing. I mean, the bills have been out for less than a week, and I'm basically going by what our phone calls were like and what the walk-in customers were saying over the course of maybe the last 3 business days, like Thursday and Friday of last week and today. As soon as I knew there was a problem, because I could hear from the phone conversations that were happening in our division, I let the CFO know what I was hearing, and he followed up. So we do share information, and the assessor's office staff is very good about sharing with us too. So when they hear something, they let us know. When I know something, I let them know. And I'm one of those people that sends very long emails with lots of information to people about what the bills look like and so forth. So I think they're all sick of getting my emails, but I'd rather let them and customer service and the mayor's office know what to expect when the people call, so that we look like we know what we're doing.
Yep.
But I couldn't give you an accurate guess. It might not be as bad as it sounds, but really any bill that isn't right is disturbing to me. We go through a lot to try to make it accurate, because as it was identified, this is the largest out-of-pocket payment that most people make. It's also, in some cases, the only involvement that they have with the city. If they don't have kids in the school, and they don't have a dog, and they don't go to the beach, and they don't use the parks, this is it, maybe they vote absentee, but sometimes they don't interact with City Hall but for the bill. So if there's a problem, we're acutely aware of how important it is to fix it. And we're tearing our hair out, believe me.
I'm sure. And again, I ask, and again, it's not the purview of this board, but once you get a handle on scope and scale of the issue, I would look to you and Henry and the mayor to figure out what, if any, proactive communication is appropriate out to the city.
Absolutely.
One last suggestion is maybe, given that we have heard these as being issues, do you think you could include in your commentary for the next month or two, since the type of issues that you have been hearing from customers, and so that we are more informed and aware of what the issues might be.
Absolutely. And when you get your June narrative that I sent today, it does identify what the 3 issues that I identified tonight. That is part of the written report as well.
Yep.
Super, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments for Lisa? Lisa, thank you again. You're doing incredible work, you and your team. So it is greatly appreciated.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
All right, Tom, where do we want to go next? Oak Hills?
Yes, Oak Hills is next, and we have Alan Dutton on the line. Take it away, Alan.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the Board of Investment Taxation. I'm here to report on the month of May and other things going on. The May report was in your budget, which I'm sure you've all read all the fine print, but I'll just hit the highlights if I may. And it's always a pleasure to be able to give these reports with the numbers that we're producing. So in the month of May, well, bottom line points of view, we ended up 60,000 over our budgeted profit for the month. We were $67,000 over in revenue. Golf obviously is the main driver here. More use of the club, the fees, the golf carts, and also we had some good Monday outings on Mondays, which also helped our revenue there. Our expenses were $7,000 up based upon the increased business. However, that just does give us a $60,000 increase in our profit for the month of May. On a year-to-date budget basis, with 11 months in the bank, we find ourselves $345,000 ahead of our budgeted profit after 11 months, which obviously is a good number to be at. Looking forward to the end of this month, the end of July, the end of June, which was the end of our year. We haven't finalized the numbers yet, but here again, it was another good month. Maybe not as good as May. In talking to my controller Mark today, he tells me we ended up cash-wise with $650,000 in the bank, and the budget called for us to have $286,000. So obviously, the increased revenue is obviously showing us in cash. So this extra cash obviously helps us. It helps us fund our capital program for next year, which has been set at $274,000 for our capital budget for next year. So we look after 11 months in a very good position, and by the end of the year, fiscal year, we will also be in a very, very good position. So not sure if there are any other questions on the financials for Oak Hills at all. I do have a couple other things just to bring to your attention, but any questions on the financial?
Alan, this is Troy, real quick. I have 2 questions. One is, we talked last month. It seems like you have a lot of cash there. Are you working with Henry to try to make sure we limit our amount of cash in these smaller banks that we have here, or any bank?
Yeah, I'm actually working with Gary Leeds. Gary, I think, is an ex-CFO of a major company in Stanford. He's the finance guy who's brought onto the commission. He's the guy who's working with Mark, working with our with the bank that we have, and seeing what else is out there. Because obviously, with this amount of cash, we can squirrel some of it away and in whatever it is, and in protected up to $250,000, so we can start to get some interest on it. Yes, I don't have the details of that, but I will be able to report that on the next meeting, Troy.
Okay, just keep an eye on that. And then I know you hired a new general manager, and that new position is going to be Jim. I met him over the weekend. He's going to handle all aspects of the course, right? Oak
So
Hills Park.
you're stealing my thunder here, Troy, you know? I was about to make a grand announcement. Yes, as of July 1st, and I did send an email out to everybody, etc., introducing him with his picture, which I was quite proud I was able to do that. James Holliday is the new general manager of the club. And I'm really pleased that he's there because it takes some of the pressure off me somewhat. He will be totally responsible, working obviously with Jim Shell, with Mark Gartner, and with Paul Alexander, our three department heads, and will be involved. And if you've seen him or not, he's been standing around introducing himself to the members as they come in. His office on a temporary basis is going to be down at the old starters area, and then I think next year we're moving back up to the clubhouse. So he's totally responsible for that, and is getting his feet wet. And I look forward to working with him.
Great. Good luck. Thank you.
Troy, this might be an appropriate time to add a comment about cash. I was very concerned when Silicon Valley Bank went bankrupt. We have a lead bank, which is a classic middle-sized, medium-sized regional bank. And we often have between $20 and $30 million in unsecured deposits. And we contacted the bank, and I'm pleased to report that we finally have signed off on the agreements and implemented something called the tri-party agreement. It's a three-way agreement between Webster Bank, Bank of New York Mellon, and ourselves. And what happens is Webster Bank takes cash and they invest it in securities. This agreement forces them to inform Bank of New York Mellon, which is probably the leading custodial bank in the country. It tells them how much unsecured cash we have every evening. They call them every morning, and they direct their securities to be designated as collateral for us. So the bank keeps the ownership of the securities. They get the interest and dividends that's coming. Their money is invested. But God forbid anything happens to the bank, we don't have to go through FDIC. We now own those securities that are collateral for our deposits. It was something I had done years ago in Nassau County. And amazingly, Webster Bank said, Nassau County is a client of ours. We do that for them now. So we were able to implement that. So right now, whether it's 20 million, 30 million, or whatever, every night we have 102% of the cash that we have on hand collateralized with securities. And I personally went through a whole list of what securities are acceptable to us. Obviously, you want low risk, not a lot of variability with interest rates, et cetera. And so that's working. And we are now talking to many other banks with which we have dealings. These are small local banks. They often accommodate us and help Lisa in collecting taxes. We generally just buy CDs from them. But if it's over 250,000, we are going to either get tri-party agreements with them, or we're going to cut back our investments to $250,000. I don't want to have a dollar at risk because a bank may go bankrupt. So we put in the big step with Webster, and we're working with the other banks as well as those CDs mature. So Alan, if you could have your treasury financial people contact me, I'd like to go over what you're doing with your deposits, what's at risk, and we'll figure out a way to get that risk down to zero.
Will do, Henry.
Okay, can we make sure, Alan, that that's done before our next meeting and your report out
100%.
to us? Thank you, because I know that did come up last month as well.
Yep, 100% will do. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the overall update, Henry. Alan, any other updates from your side on Oak Hills?
The budget is in city. It was sent to the city for this upcoming fiscal year.
Thank you. Any other questions for Alan?
I have two comments on this. Number one, Henry, I applaud your effort in making sure that the cash is safe and collateralized, because you never know what's going to happen with some of these banks. And, you know, there is no such thing as too big to fail. So I think that's terrific, because any kind of hiccup on that score would be very, very bad for the city. On Oak Hills, given the level of cash, and I don't know what the terms are of the renegotiated debt that's owed back to the city, but perhaps is there an opportunity to prepay some of that liability and to bring your balance sheet, bring the liabilities downside on your balance sheet, and that would also mitigate any of the treasury issues relative to cash.
I think from our point of view, we'd rather put the money back into the course and the part of the capital budget, which is where I believe the money is really needed. You know, I mean, I'm not sure if the debt, it's on paper. I'm not sure it's been paid off. I don't know about the finances about it, but just from my point of view as an accounting layman, you know, the money that we're making, we do need to finance our capital budget, and the more we can spend on the course, you know, in the capital we need to do over these next 2 to 3, 4 years, is just where where the money should be. But I could be told differently from people that know a lot more about this than I do.
Because I see on the balance sheet there is $1.9 million of consolidated city debt, and I just don't know what the terms are of that. And I don't know, maybe Henry or Tom, you can comment on.
I could help you out that little, Ann. A couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, everything was renegotiated. That debt was renegotiated with the club, with the city. In essence, there's no interest on the loan, and it's out for 25 years. So, and the good thing about the Oak Hills Authority is that the money stays, what money they make there stays in the course. So, and they are trying to do capital improvement. So, I mean, there is I don't really see the urgency for them to really have to make. The agreement was made a couple of years ago, and they've been living up to it by making the dollar, you know, they pay $1 around and also 1% at the year end. So as far as that goes, there is no real advantage for them from an interest rate, because I don't think there's zero interest on them anymore. So.
And they paid $119,000 to the city this current fiscal year as well. That between the dollar around and the debt, I think it was $120,000 we paid, you know, in this last budget, fiscal year.
They've been adhering to the renegotiated agreement. So.
Is there a maturity to the debt?
Yes, it's going to be like I think it's in 25 years they gave them or something. They really pushed it out. The Common Council was involved, and we were involved, and so they've been living up to that, which I'm happy about.
No, absolutely they have. I think Ann's comment, though, is worthy of some level of consideration from the standpoint, Alan, of completely agree with you. In order to continue to make money, the course needs to continue to invest in itself, to draw players, etc. However, given that your capital improvement plan for next year is $275,000, I'm rounding roughly based on the numbers you've said, and there's $350,000 in unanticipated revenues. You know, and there's no urgency, there's no issue requiring early repayment, but if the organization is more flush with cash than not, there's no reason the city wouldn't appreciate, you know, early repayment on certain portions of that debt. Again, recognizing first and foremost that you need to be in a position from a cash perspective and a capital investment perspective to continue to draw players to the course to drive the revenues on a sustained basis.
And we also have lease payments, about $154,000 a year that we pay for our carts and for the equipment that we lease rather than purchase outright.
Understood.
Yep.
But I think Ann's comment still is valid to say, if you're in a situation where there is excess cash, there is an opportunity to pay down some of that debt sooner than the terms would require.
Got it.
Because I would say it's a quick pro. The city was probably very generous in either forgiving, giving this way below market rate loan. So should you, if you are able, if you have the cash to be able to repay the city, should you ever have a problem again, then the city would be more welcoming, I would open up its pocketbook to help the authority out as it has done in the past.
Great.
Any other comments for Alan? All right, Tom, any other open business that we need to cover?
Well, after that, it's just all the regular monthly update, monthly reports. Henry, did you want to touch on anything in particular?
Yeah, I think I'd like to go over fiscal year to date operating expenses and operating revenues. I'm on page 62 of 76 and 69 of 76 from the package. So looking at the operating expenditures to date on page 62, the revised budget was $415.8 million. We've expended 377.8. We have encumbrances of 2.3. That adds up to 380 million. So right now we're showing a favorable variance of $35.8 million. It would be great if the year ended now. We have 2 more months and there are expenditures we know are going to come through. I highly doubt it's going to be $35 million worth. We are very pleased with the variances that we've seen. Tom and his team check this every month. They are in communication with the departments that are having issues throughout the year to make sure that they handle the budget and come in at or below budget. So 35.8 million favorable on the expense side. On the revenue side, page 69, we have revised budget of $410.2 million. And the expenditures, the revenue to date is only $401.8 million. So right now we are short with an unfavorable revenue balance of 8.4 million. 2 points. 8.4 is a lot less than 35.8. So if the music stopped right now, we're doing fine. Having said that, as was indicated earlier, government accounting, which involves modified accrual basis accounting, allows expenditures and receipts of cash 60 days after the year end to be included in the fiscal year results. We know, as Lisa reported earlier, we expect more money coming in on tax collections, as well as possibly some other areas. So we expect that 8.4 million unfavorable variance to shrink a little bit. Net bottom line, we are very pleased with where we are. We're monitoring it carefully. Chitsime tends to do a soft close at around August 15th, gives her 2 weeks to book the final entries and get the numbers to the auditors. So we're really looking at about 4 to 5 weeks of activity. We know what's out there. We think we're going to have a nice favorable surplus for the year. And next month, we can report on it.
Right. Thank you, Henry. It's very encouraging.
You're welcome.
Question. Henry, what would you say are the top 3 contributors to the 35.8 million expense?
Well, I think the first one off the top of my head, and Tom is closer to the numbers, I'll let him correct me, is OPEB expenditures. So our actuaries look at pension numbers and do their analyses and forecasts every year. And then they give us a number, which is the target contribution that we should make. But on OPEB, they do it every 2 years. So you may recall during the budget, we had over an $8 million favorable variance on OPEB. Well, that's because we were discussing it for next year's budget. But last year, they didn't go through that estimate. It was based on the prior year. So we have a positive favorable variance right now, Tom, 7-8 million.
Yeah, I would say so. That's about right. And the other two areas where we did very strong on the revenue side, at least, was building permits. In Bill Ireland's area, there continues to be a tremendous increase in largely COVID related to renovations and expansions of houses, new decks, new so on and so forth. So they far exceeded their target revenues on that front.
Let me go back to expenses, Ann, that you asked about. The number two for me would be vacancies, personnel vacancies. So we budget for people that have approved vacancies. And especially with this hiring market that you read all about, it's hard to fill spots. People are quitting willy-nilly. So if you think about it, let's say on average, we fill the spots 6 months into the year. Some we don't fill for the whole year, some we fill early. And so all of those vacancies have budget of salaries, and salaries are 70 to 80% of our expenses. So I think we get a favorable variance on our expenses because we just don't have the hiring that we hope to get. Chief Walsh just recently got to his full complement of police staff. But when you look at the city broadly, we've had a lot of vacancies. And that's maybe just a bigger amount this year. But historically, that's always been the case. We're always catching up. So to me, those are the two biggest items that lead to the expense reduction. What's offsetting is some of the inflation. Chief Gatta will tell us if we don't buy the fire engine this month, it's going up another $100,000. So it's hit different departments differently. We've worked with commodity pricing for electricity and natural gas to try to lock in reasonable rates to control what we spend and minimize that risk. So it's a mix of many, many things, but I think payroll and OPEB right now are the reasons we have the shortfall. And again, there are some expenditures, especially from the Board of Ed, that we know are coming through. They're not yet in the system, but we know those bills are coming through. So that 35 should shrink significantly.
One thought and suggestion now that we're coming to the year end, and I go back and I reflect upon the budgeting process where some people, particularly Bill Ireland's group, had come in looking for additional headcount, which they did not receive. And if Bill's group is still coming in over budget and creating additional revenue for the city, I think we talked about potentially reevaluating some of those headcount requests and putting some of the resources where it could really be used and it's money well spent.
My comment is, I absolutely agree, but there are two factors I like to think about. One is, I want to make sure that that increase that he had this year continues and persists next year. Is it a one-year phenomenon or is it going to come through for next year? The second is to remember, I think the mayor reminded me this as soon as I got here, when you hire someone, it's usually with a 30-year term. And when you add payroll, we're not as flexible as maybe in the private sector, where when a new hot product on Wall Street hits, they hire 50 people, or the technology companies added a tremendous amount of staff, and then a year later they laid everybody off. So we don't have that flexibility. So we tend to be very cautious about hiring to know that there's a demand that's going to persist and the person could have a long career with us.
And if I could just jump in for a second, recall that I think Bill had asked for two individuals, one the blight inspector, and then the permitting instructor. And the deal that the arrangement that we came up with was to delay the hirings until January 1st. So it wasn't completely rejected, but it wasn't completely blessed on July 1st. So we're in a sort of a 6-month hold. And depending on how all the actuals shake out, maybe there's a shot for, rollovers to pull that forward a little bit.
So maybe it's
Thanks very
10,
much.
something like that. That's great. Thank you, Tom.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments? Anything else we need to cover? Hearing none, can I get a motion to adjourn, please? Thank you, Kendrick. All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Have a nice evening, everyone. We'll talk to you in about a month's time.
Thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Night. Have a good month.